All right, we start.
Yeah, we're recording, so you can start
All right,
anytime.
three, two, and one. Cambridge Insider podcast time again. And I'm very excited to be joined by my fellow host, Mr. Craig Batson. How are you, buddy?
I am doing fantastic today. We are recording on a Monday, which is unusual for us, and feeling good about being back at work.
I do want all of our listeners to know that we are also now available on YouTube. And if you need to see the visuals from today's episode because both Craig and I look spectacular in our winter gear.
We look like we're recording on a Monday. Like that's what we look like today. It's like me, you, and our executive producer Dean are just actually Dean looks great. You and I have
Dean does look
hoodies
good.
and beanies on.
Yeah, you and I look terrible, to be honest. Dean looks spectacular. All right. Well, if you are tuned in, we appreciate each and every one of you. As always, like, subscribe, share the podcast, leave us with a note. So today's episode, we're gonna change things up just slightly. We're gonna be discussing students, specifically what students should be doing at this time of the year. Looking forward to the recruitment seasons that are ahead. Just before I bring in Mr. Batson on some of his expertise with regards to students, schools, if you are listening, we never want to leave you out hanging. So remember, it's now early December. Schools, you should, number one, already have confirmed your tuition. If it's not possible for you to confirm your tuition, think about what that tuition could be, not increasing it by more than 5%. Ideally, really not increasing it at all and freezing your tuition. And that's really important if you do want to be competitive in the coming recruitment season. Number two, reevaluating your admissions requirements. So, as an admissions team, you're going to be sitting down, you're going to be thinking about what your goal is for international students. Who will you accept to reach that goal, and aligning some of your requirements in line with those goals. In particular, keeping your admissions policies and requirements flexible. I think during this year, more than any other year, is very important. We spoke about it in an earlier episode, but considering conditional enrollments, a student who might not quite be there, but with a little extra support can certainly be a great asset to your school. Certainly reach out to your Cambridge network program manager or team associate that works with you. We've got some great products that can help students with regards to conditional enrollments. And then finally, something that we found very important is to update your marketing portfolio with COVID-specific resources. It's a question we get all the time. So, many of our schools have great marketing portfolios that lack a bit of COVID-specific information. So if you could send those through, that'll be a great asset. So schools, if you are not already doing that, look into some of those things as we head into the Christmas season. All right, Mr. Batson, turning our attention to students. And I thought today we could go through, I've just created a little list of what I think students should be doing. And I'd, at this stage of the admission season, I suppose, and I'd love your input on these. So if you're good to go, I'm going to read some of these off and get your input.
Let's do it. Let's talk about students. The reason we're all here.
Excellent. I like the positivity. All right. So number one, I think students should be looking at taking their English proficiency tests. Why are these so important for students coming to the US?
So this year is going to be a new and exciting year, especially when it comes to admissions tests. The typical a TOEFL test that students are going to be taking and prepping for are going to be really difficult to get. Now, myself personally, I think this is a good thing because the admissions tests are probably my least favorite part of the application process. I understand why we have to have them and how it's important to gauge English, but so many of these tests are tests that you have to study for specifically. And you need to be a good test taker to do well on them. And it doesn't always provide every student with the opportunity to showcase their ability. Now, with the upheaval in this year's recruitment, I think it's going to give our schools a chance to look at different tests to take. So you have the new Duolingo test that we can look at. You have all sorts of ones. There's the ITEP test that we talked about on an episode from October. That's one that you can take online and really showcase your English ability without having to study for the test.
I think importantly as well for students just to do a little research, connect with your Cambridge network representative to see what tests your school requires. Schools are being more flexible, but we want to make sure that if a specific school that you are interested in has a requirement about a specific test, that you do your research and hopefully plan to take that test as soon as possible. And as Craig said, very rightly so, there are several options out there. So do a little research, book those tests, book those time slots, and make sure that you have an English proficiency test as part of your application. So number two, something that I think is very important for students to continue doing is to continue developing their language skills. You know, often we get students, and once they've sort of started with the admissions process, interviews, or started submitting some of these applications, they sort of forget a little bit about the English language development. How important is it, Craig, for students to continue that path to improving their skills?
Yeah, so I think, again, this comes back to how unique of a year this is going to be. And when you're preparing and interviewing at a school, and if you say, okay, this is my English skills, and they're not going to improve in the next 8 months, by the time I get accepted to your school and show up, schools are going to be more hesitant to take you. So if you can come and say, look, I'm taking these classes. I have a plan to take this summer camp where we're going to be focusing on English. This is how I'm going to improve my English between now and when I show up at your school. You're going to be able to expand the schools that are going to be willing to accept you. And the ones are going to be more enthusiastic about getting you. And this can be, tutoring. This can be working with anybody to improve your skills between when you conduct the interview and when you're going to show up.
Absolutely, well said. And also just to remember two things. Number one, schools are really placing a big emphasis on student interviews. So language development is important because you have to be able to competently perform in a school interview. And then number two, remembering that the more you can develop your language before you interview, and importantly before you arrive in the US, the easier your transition is going to be. You're going to be able to speak to your host family easier. You're going to be able to transition into different academic requirements and classes easier. You'll be able to make friends easier. So certainly English language proficiency needs to be front and center for all students. Continue developing it. It's a life skill that will put you in good stead when you come to the US.
Well, and on this podcast, we've been talking a lot about how competitive this market is going to be for schools to recruit students. But this also has a benefit to students. If you show up and show you have good skills and show you're going to improve and show that you're going to succeed, you're going to be able to get into, ideally a better school than you might have in a normal recruitment season. So by putting in that extra effort and taking tutoring and doing well in these situations, you're going to be able to up your game and get into a top tier school. Exactly.
If you are a student, if you're a family, if you're an agent listening to this, if you are lost and you're not quite sure where to go for tutoring, reach out to your Cambridge representative. We've got an outstanding academic services department that has some of the best tutoring specifically related to English as a secondary language. So reach out to them for some more details. I'll make sure that our executive producer, Dean, puts something in the show notes for you as well. Number three, which I think is very important for students, Mr. Batson, is to consider doing either a mock interview or another service that we do offer is the interview coaching for students. Mm-hmm. Why is this important? And again, specific to this year, why is this so important?
Yeah, so this year, all my schools are looking at upping their interview game because they know that that's going to give them the best idea of how a student's English is going to be. I'm having schools expanding into written sessions. I'm having schools bringing teachers on to interview them. Still trying to keep them in the regular time frame, but seeing what they can do to succeed in that time frame. And so a student needs to be prepared for this. And if you can get a mock interview, if you can meet with somebody in advance to go through it with an expert, that will really give you that big leg up to really wow some schools.
Exactly. I actually had a mock interview this morning, and some of the things that I try to incorporate. Yes, I want to speak to you about what are some of the questions that you could potentially get from a school, and we work through some of those questions and how your answers might look. But importantly as well, what should you be doing before your interview? What should you be researching? How to best prepare for this interview, I think, is very important. So, students, in most cases, if you do have that mock interview or you are undertaking coaching for your interview, you're speaking to an expert in the field who's, been in the industry for 6, 7, 8 years. He or she's interviewed thousands of students, knows exactly what schools are looking at as well. So it certainly, like Craig said, could be that leg up. And if you are applying to a very competitive school, that could be the reason you get into that school and are accepted. Number 4 on my list, Craig, research schools that you are applying to. Why is this important for students?
So this is another thing where we can show our expertise as students in the interview. When you know more about a school that you're applying to, they're going to be more excited to be meeting with you. Now, that's my experience, and I believe that's yours, Dean Stevens. And so we're hoping that if you can tell a school why you want to go to their school, what programs do they offer that you want to take part in, what aspects of their location, their teachers that make you excited to be interviewing, that's going to be able to also up your game, get you into a higher tier school as schools are really looking at expanding their student bases.
Absolutely. And it also just, the more research you do, the more, resources you have to draw from. It gives you a platform to be able to showcase your language skills. So if you know something about a robotics club and you may be struggling to find the words for an answer, mention the robotics club. It's a great way to showcase your skills, showcase that you've been proactive, and hopefully entice a school into giving you that coveted enrollment seat that all of our students want. So, certainly research schools, have a look at what programs they offer, have a look at what programs you are interested in specifically as well. The final one, Mr. Batson, that I have on my list is understanding arrival circumstances for students. Talk to me a little bit about this.
Yeah, so this means understanding how you're going to be getting to your school and what you're going to need to do to be able to do that. Is the school going to be offering online classes that you can join? Are you going to need to quarantine in the United States before? Are you going to need to show negative COVID tests? Are you going to be vaccinated? To understand these before you're making your decision is going to make your life a lot easier and make sure that you don't really get surprised moving forward. This is something that seems like a big deal, but it just requires a little bit of research. Ask your agents, ask your Cambridge Network advisor, hey, what do I need to do to get into California? What's it going to be like there? These are easy answerable questions that we can provide safe answers to it and make you feel comfortable about coming to the United States.
Absolutely. It's about streamlining the process, making sure that students and schools can meet somewhere in the middle in a safe space where everybody's needs are met. Mr. Batson, as always, a wealth of knowledge. I think this is the second time that I've said this, but I feel like I ask you questions and you just have great answers. Any final thoughts from your side?
No, not today. Nothing exciting today. Check out our anchor.fm page. Send us some questions. We've gotten a couple questions, but don't have enough to, do a whole mailbag podcast, which is really, as a big podcast fan, those are my favorite podcasts. So I'd like to get our first one in. So we know people are listening. We have the numbers, but we'd love to hear from you. You can do those questions on anchor.fm. You can find us on YouTube. Type your questions in there. Email us. My email is craig.batson@cambridgenetwork.com. So feel free to shoot me an email just to say hi. I haven't gotten my first fan mail yet. So long story short, when I said I didn't have anything to add, I actually did.
I mean, that was the longest nothing to add answer we've ever had on the podcast.
We call that a Seinfeld.
To all of our listeners, as per usual, thank you for tuning in. Reach out to your Cambridge representative if you have any questions, any follow-up questions that you might have. And we'll catch you around the corner. Have a tremendous week. Bye-bye, everybody.